This program is brought to you in part thanks to generous support from the Hawaii State Foundation on Culture and the Arts, through appropriations from the legislature of the state of Hawaii, and by the National Endowment for the Arts, and the Hawaii Council for the Humanities.
I think it's important to know that kapa is the Hawaiian word for that substance made out of fiber, plant fiber usually, that is used throughout the tropical zone in many other parts of the world. So that in Samoa it's siapo, in Tonga it's tafa, in Hawaii it's kapa.
Places that didn't have cotton traditions, linens, or woven things ended up somehow discovering that certain tree barks could be beaten and worked out to be able to make things you could cover yourself with.
When the Hawaiians developed this art form after they settled in Hawaii and lost contact with the central Polynesia, they developed a very high state of the art.
When Polynesians settled the Hawaiian archipelago sometime between 300 and 800 AD, they brought plants that were essential to their way of life. One of the plants they brought was the wauke, Brassanetia papyrifera, or paper mulberry, the plant that was vital to the practice of making kapa. One Hawaiian legend tells us that the goddess Hina could not dry her kapa because the sun traveled too quickly across the sky. Her son Maui stood atop Haleakala, lassoed the sun, and forced it to travel more slowly. Thus, both time and the rhythm of the day as we know it are associated with the cycle of kapa making.
Kapa in Hawaiian culture was used as clothing. It's beaten, so all the clothing was essentially a rectangle. So the women would wear a wraparound skirt called a pa'u. The men would wear a loincloth and called it a malo. There was like a cloak, shoulder covering, that was called a kihe or kikepa. It was also the blankets. It was also used ceremonially in the temple dressings. It was used on the ki'i, or the statues, when it was that god's time that he was, he ruled or he was awake. It was used extensively in burials. They had different ways of preparing bodies to be buried, and so many of them that they found were wrapped in like black kapa. So it was, to take the cotton, logo, it was the fabric of our lives.
Several things distinguish Hawaiian kapa from other Pacific Island kapa. Finished pieces were felted together and appear seamless. The color palette used in decorating was extensive, and the kapa designs more intricate than those of other island groups. But one of the most unique and beautiful features of Hawaiian kapa is watermarking.
If you see a piece of kapa, just look at it, just flat, you don't see that watermark. But if you lift it up to the light, you see this wonderful surprise. And the watermarks differed, as I understand it, from family to family or from kapa maker to kapa maker.
That watermarking there, to me, is the kauna of the kapa. It is not a hidden meaning, it's that underlying thing, which is very Hawaiian as well.
Ooh, why don't you just leave it like that?
Just leave it like that.
Here's the thread right here. And so it is just going around. They open the seam. This one is folded over, so this seam is open. But they pull it pretty tight. But then you see that you can see all the fiber inside here from whatever they were using.
Many have the impression that Westerners introduced sewing to Hawaiians, yet there are pre-contact examples of Hawaiian kapa moe, sleeping kapa, and malo fragments that were stitched together using a needle made of bone, kawila wood, or bamboo. Pieces are also joined without a needle by punching holes in the kapa and drawing the thread through by hand. Thread was made of hau or kapa fibers. Though kapa making is usually thought of as women's work, the complex process also involved men.
Actually, it was a woman's art or a woman's craft. The men were very important though to it. They helped in the planting. They made all the tools. And if the woman didn't have the tools that they made, they could not produce this fine grade of fabric that they did produce. I had a great husband that could help me fashion the tools. He made my kua and he cut the forms for the beaters. We were doing this traditionally. Husband made the tool, wife beat the kapa.
Laulima. It simply in English means cooperation. But it means more than that in Hawaiian because it means all the several hands working together usually to accomplish something. So it's more than just cooperating with each other because you had to have the help of others in order to accomplish what you needed to do.
Western cloth was introduced when first contact with the outside world came to the Hawaiian Islands. Western clothing and cloth quickly became part of a new material culture. Cotton cloth was soft, brightly colored, sturdy, and could be washed many, many times, outlasting kapa fiber, which is essentially a paper.
The process for making kapa was a long, arduous, hard work stuff, and with this new fabric, it was so easy to acquire, a pa'u or a shawl, a kihei, This is Hawaiian, to be bold and bright. And the design is bold and, telling us that this came before the ohe kapala, the bamboo printer. This came before that.
Ironically, kapa making as a craft reached its zenith after contact, largely due to the introduction of metal. Metal tools allowed for finer carving of kapa tools, and therefore finer design printing inspired by calico. Western cloth may also have motivated kapa makers to imitate the fine texture of cotton.
By the light you can tell the distribution of the cloth. They were really going for the delicateness of some of these things. Like, look at this border. This is all hand dotted, these little things. So it's like, did they see lace and then want to replicate that somehow? Just that fineness of it?
Much of the kapa that Captain James Cook acquired on his voyages was coarse and thick when compared to the soft, thinner kapa made later in the 19th century.
When you look at it at that particular time of kapa, it's all the same. It could have all been made by the same person. It's how uniform it was as almost an industry standard. And when you try and pull it, you can't tear it. And yet it's thin like a paper towel. And all the kapa, Smithsonian Museum and Bishop Museum and Peabody Museum and all these places have these kapa that are this fine right before they stop making it completely.
Unfortunately, just as kapa making was experiencing this remarkable refinement, it also went into a steep decline. By the 1860s, it was reported that kapa was only seen in its plainer forms in outlying areas, and by 1890, production and use had almost ceased. Kapa making lay virtually dormant for almost a century until the late 1960s and early 1970s, when a cultural reawakening in Hawaii began to take root. Many Hawaiians realized that over-assimilation had nearly erased valuable cultural practices.
Kapa was one of these things that not because it was any militant kind of thing, but just it was one of the things, one of our arts that had been completely lost.
My first recollection of somebody wanting to do it was Malia Solomon, that she started to do some work around the 1960s. And what she did was go to Central Polynesia, and where kapa was still being made by the Samoans and by the Tongans, and got general background there. And then she came home and started to make some pieces here in Hawaii. And then pretty soon along comes people like me and people like Moana Isley, who basic reason why we get involved with all of this is that we have this very strong curiosity. We had to find out, how did they do that,
It was just wanting to know how. And from that, from just wanting to know how, you learned a whole lot of other things. And it's all those other kinds of things like the laulima, like the ahonui, like the kuleana, like the ho'ihi, the respect that you gotta have for all kinds of things. We call them values today, but they were just practical, fundamental ways that fit into everyday life.
Pua Van Dorp is also one of the early kapa makers who did much to research and recover this lost art.
I believe in a lot of things that get passed down genetically, and I think certain kinds of cultural and historical knowledge are part of them, not just the color of your eyes or the color of your hair, but things that you know and things you're drawn to.
Holy moly. Mm-hmm. There's at least 2 different types of watermarks on this, correct? Mm-hmm. And at least 2 different colors.
Mm-hmm. It's the lines,
it's the
pounded one way and then pounded one way. No, you're right. It's not.
It's too. It's too deliberate.
It is.
While many of these new kapa makers received some instruction, they relied heavily on the work of early Hawaiian historians, Western anthropologists, and the kapa collections held by various museums. Betty Lou Cam, the Bishop Museum's Director of Cultural Collections, and kapa makers continue to learn from the museum's collection.
The lines that are on here, they remind me very much of the lapa.
So would those have been created by bamboo liners, do you think? Because they are hand.
I think they might have been, for the amount of lines you have here.
Much of their kapa knowledge came from determination, from trial and error, and from sharing the things they were learning with each other.
We shared what we had found out and what worked and what didn't work, But most of us worked by ourselves, individually, all by ourselves.
Scraping the bark while it's still in the round on the stick is easier than peeling off the entire bark.
Yeah.
And trying to work it on a flat surface. Anyway, this is one of the processes that we've kind of come upon just by trial and error.
I went asking questions about kapa making to anybody that would listen to me. And I went and I looked up in Bishop Museum, I looked in libraries, I looked everywhere that I could to try and get information about kapa.
And I still remember, and this is like 15 years ago, I had my tool that I made, and I'm pounding it, and I look at the book again and pound it, and I remember crying out of frustration. Okay, so I just kept pounding until I, kind of got something that I thought must have been close.
Today, a small number of people in the Hawaiian Islands are actively making kapa, but their ranks are steadily growing. Many kapa makers have had gallery shows and are encouraged by the rising interest in their craft. And once again, kapa is being used for traditional purposes.
I really want it to be more than just find out. I want you to use it. I want you to take it and wrap your body with it. I want you to use it however you have to use it. I don't want it to just sit on the wall someplace and look good.
This is good to get kapa out and in galleries and on walls and in frames. But for me personally, I'm always happier when I can make, somebody calls me and says, oh, you know, my sister's having a baby and she'd really like a piece of Hawaiian kapa to catch the baby in when it's born. And, or, you know, somebody just passed away and they want to put the ashes in a piece of Hawaiian kapa and they're just going to, you know, put the ashes and put the whole thing in the ocean and let it go.
I'd like to recognize the front row.
In 2011, at the Merry Monarch, the yearly hula festival held in Hilo, many kapa makers participated in a project that put Hawaiian kapa to a truly traditional use.
One of our kapa kupuna, Marie McDonald, got some of us together and said, you know what, you guys, before I die, I want to see a whole halau dressed in Hawaiian kapa and dancing. And so we said, okay, we can do that.
I really wanted to do something big and wonderful. Clothing, because that was the primary use of, for the kapa that Hawaiian women made, my ancestors made.
The kapa makers approached Nalani Kanakaole, the kumuhula of Hilo's world-renowned halau o Kikuhi, a halau hula that would be performing on the Ho'ike night of the Merry Monarch Festival, the night of non-competitive dancing.
Marie called me to see if I was willing to participate in this project. Of course, I jumped at the idea. I loved it. And the people that she worked with also, they were very feisty crowd, but they were passionate about what they were doing. That's what I loved about it.
You can take one design and you think it's going across this way, making lines, right? But it really is this way. With the help and support of all the kapa makers, we reached out and invited as many kapa makers as we knew. We have kapa makers from all islands. We have men and women. We have mothers and daughters. So this is really, to me, just a real coming together of a wonderful cross-section of the kapa community.
Just like when you're in halau every Sunday, you have time to perfect it with the guidance of your kumu, right? So the same thing with us making kapa. We keep growing it and we keep practicing it, and that's why it's the way it is.
This ambitious project is one of great significance in Hawaii's history, as the halau hula had not performed in authentic Hawaiian kapa for over 100 years. The project took many hands and hours of labor. Kapa is made from the paper mulberry tree, which originated in East Asia. Called wauke in Hawaii, it was introduced by the first Polynesian settlers, carried in their canoes over thousands of miles of ocean.
If every single person was wearing kapa, then wauke must have been growing everywhere. And now you cannot find wauke growing wild unless you go way back into the mountains and way back into the nooks and crannies.
In Hawaiian lore, the origin of the plant is attributed to a man named Maikoha. When he realized death was near, he instructed his daughters to bury him near a stream. It is said that from his body, the first wauke grew. Wauke thrives when it is sheltered from too much wind and when it has ample water. As the wauke grows, lateral growth is removed in order to get straight, clean stems. A choice stem for harvesting would be very straight, tall, and at least 2 inches wide.
It needs a lot of water to thrive, and and to get nice material for beading from it. So when we planted this was the area that was the lowest and it seemed the dampest at the time, and that's why I chose this instead of someplace else, you know. And besides, it was clear. We took off all the grass that was growing here and we had a clearing.
It's not a hard wood. I lift it out so I don't bend the ones on the outside. And then I'm just going to drop it over here. I've harvested some other ones here, and you can see why I chose them.
The stems are pretty clear.
Yeah, so what I do now is I discard the tops because the fibers, they're too young and they're short. Okay, and I'm going to cut it right here, just before that intersection. And this is the part that I'm going to keep, which now is about 8 feet tall, 8 feet long. So in the course of like working with kapa, I learned so much about the plant. I learned how to take care of it, you know, what its needs are, how I can take this plant that comes out of the soil and is nurtured by the sun and the water and all the elements, and I can take it from that and make something unique. When you're just in the patch and it's just the sound of the wauke and the wildlife, like the birds, and it's really quite pleasant in here.
Once the stems are harvested, the brown outer bark is removed by scraping to expose the bast, the white inner bark. Traditionally, this was done with sharp shells. Opihi and mother of pearl were often used.
The outer bark has to be removed, and all the green coloring from the plant photosynthesizing has to be removed. If you don't remove it, then your bast is discolored, and the object, the finest, is the whitest, the clearest bast. So the kapa makers will spend quite a bit of time removing all of that green from the branch. I just want to point out, you see how the teeth are curved? I'm going to use that curve in removing the bark from the branch.
Next, the bast is removed from the hard stem using a nihooki, a knife made of shark's teeth mounted on a wooden handle.
All the way down the branch. And you can see the sap inside there. That's what you want. You don't want woody. You don't want it woody and sticky and dry. You want this. So you go all the way down. Take your it's off. The inside of the bast here and the outside on this side. And we'll take this and roll it inside out. And we're going to tie the bundle up so it doesn't unroll. We just put this in salt water. It will sit here for a week in this bucket here, the 3 pieces that we just stripped. And after a week, the bast starts to look like this. Sometimes it'll develop a little foam on it, and we'll change it maybe once during that period. So these pieces are still in the salt water. They start to get a little slippery and slimy, and much softer than the pieces that we just put in. They also start to bleach out a little bit. The salt is critical in the bleaching process. And then this bucket has pieces that have been soaked for at least a week, and we've allowed them to soak in fresh water. This is to remove any of the excess salt. Overnight. And yeah, at least overnight. And so we're ready to beat these. We want to take that extra salt out so the kapa dries. I think one of the problems that Hina might have had when the sun wouldn't stay still in the sky so her kapa could dry was that maybe she had too much salt inside and it wasn't drying. That's my idea. So she should have rinsed her kapa a little bit better. So that at this point, we're going to actually start the beating process.
This first beating is done on a kua pohaku, a stone anvil.
The beaters that we're using are called hohoa, the round beater. Sometimes it's ridged. And this is for the first beating, where we put the fiber in the mo'omo'o stage. That's first beating, we dry afterwards. And we can store it, then store it for a long time if we need to store it.
The first beating breaks down the fibers and spreads them out.
It takes 6 strips like this to make a pa'u at least 32 inches wide, all right? And it takes only 2 strips, about 8, 9, 10, 12 feet long, to make a malo. Okay, these strips are then taken and dried in the sun, usually on a grassy area.
Once dried, the strips, called mo'omo'o, can be stored indefinitely.
Okay, so put it in here to store it.
To prepare them for the next stage, the dried strips are soaked in fresh water and lightly beaten. 2 to 6 strips are then stacked, folded, wrapped up in bundles using tea leaf or banana leaves, and allowed to ret, to ferment. Retting is another feature that is unique to Hawaiian kapa. The process takes anywhere from 2 days to 3 weeks, depending on the air temperature.
The beater now becomes the iekuku, a flat four-sided beater, different from the hohoa, which is bullet shaped, and these are hardwoods as well. The anvil that we're beating on is the kuala'au. This one is made of koa that my dad made for my mother. We pick the iekuku, the designs on it. They do certain tasks. They cut the fibers shorter and they spread them out, and that's what we want them to do.
At this time, some kapa makers will use the side of their iekuku with a watermark pattern. Some will wait and use it at the end. During this stage, the fibers are broken down further and the felting process occurs.
You can see where the 2 layers have been laid on top of each other. They're still not felted completely and seamless. As we beat this several times, then those layers will not be evident. So right now we could separate them. And if we dried this out, it probably would separate. But we need to beat and have it ret, and beat and have it ret. That's the process that we're going through.
The strips eventually meld into one another, becoming thinner and wider until they are one seamless piece of cloth. In this stage, after an initial beating, the kapa might be folded, rewrapped to ferment again, and taken out for another beating. Or it could be completely beaten to size in one sitting.
When the piece is completely beaten out and dry, it's somewhat stiff. So we want to soften it so the fibers are more wearable and more pliable. We can also burnish that, push those ridges down by burnishing it with a kauri shell.
And when the kapa dries, a lot of times it's very stiff, like cardboard, and so you have to spend time, kind of, this is what I do. If the kapa is too thick, you can do this all day, and it's just not going to get soft, or not going to get soft enough where it's very pliant. And then because I like mine to have kind of more of a almost a flannel or chamois kind of feel, so then I'll use this is a piece of dike stone. You see how it's very square like this. This isn't cut. But up in the mountains, you can almost see where these kind of straight up and down angles are from the water. These mountains are all big sponges, and the way the water comes in and breaks out, it just cracks straight pieces. So this is a little bit rough. So I use this one, and it kind of brings up it lifts the fibers of the kapa, and then it just gives it a really nice soft feel. So some of them that have been really worked like that, people just are like, wow, it's like flannel.
Hawaiians created a wide palette of natural dyes for kapa: browns, grays, reds, yellows, oranges, blues, and greens. White, an important color in religious ceremonies, was achieved by bleaching in seawater and sun.
And they were lucky, they were fortunate. They were living on high islands, and much of the native materials that grew here, you know, could be used for dyes, and they did explore and experiment with them. Now this is one of the native dye plants that we have growing on our farm. The yellow blossoms, this yellow blossom is used to produce a blue-green kind of dye. Not easily controlled, but you can get good color from it. So it's a state flower, today's state flower, Hibiscus Breckenridgei.
For the kapa maker, the kukui tree, it's very multi-useful. It has wonderful bark. You scrape back at least 2 layers, the brown layer and a red blood layer below that. And you slowly steep that in just plain water. The more you cook it down, the shinier it gets, the thicker it gets. That's one of my favorite dyes, the hili kukui that you get from the bark. But the one that everybody knows about the most is taking the nut or the kernel from a mature kukui nut, putting a little stack of these kernels together, putting a fire under it, and just let it smolder and smoke and burn. It's full of oil. That oil creates a soot or a smoke, and you wipe off that lamp black into a container. And it's very oily, it's very black, and it's very indelible.
The plant that we're going to look at right now is olena, or turmeric. It's used for culinary purposes, for food. It's also used for medicine. It's used all throughout the Pacific and in Asia. It is used for dye as well. And this plant goes through a cycle in its growing season of a year. It comes up and it produces nice leaves. The plant draws energy from the sun, and then it produces a flower. The flower then produces a seed, and then the plant moves into a dormant cycle. And all the leaves die back, which is what's happening now. It dies back about this time, October, November, and pretty soon you won't see any of these. The plant will be lost in the garden, and you'll have to remember where you put it. But this is the time when it's most useful for us. Part of the cycle is that it stores up its energy during this dormant period, and it's not necessary for it to photosynthesize. So the leaves die back, and all the energy is stored in the corm. Some people call it the root, it's the corm. And so this is what we're after. It's related to ginger, so it looks like ginger, and the color is in this root. So we cut the olena that we harvested this morning up. We washed it and cut it up, and this is the first time we're going to use this tool. A stone worker made it for me. I'm convinced that the stone is going to react to the dye material, and it may or may not change it, but this would be a similar kind of vessel that they would have used.
Water is added to this mixture. You use the least amount of water because you want this color to be intense, at its highest intensity.
Color is applied in many different ways. Various techniques are used for laying in a background color. Designs are carved into narrow strips of bamboo called ohekapala, and bamboo is also carved into round stamps.
And even just that mindset of being able to just stop and focus long enough to work on something so tiny and intricate, using something, not even sure what they used exactly to carve these kind of things out. I mean, you could stop at any given point of kapa making and manufacture and just put all your focus into one part of it, like just ohekapala, and still never understand it, be able to replicate it, be able to see the way they saw, or how, you know, you look at those things like, what was the thought process that they're, you know, creating? Like, look at this piece right here. I mean,
Yeah, that's
this boggles my brains, okay? It is so fine, and it makes me think, how fine and delicate was the kapa? How perfectly flat and smooth.
yeah. To have taken that pattern.
How smooth and lump and debris free is their dye, that they can lay something on. It's not gonna get in and clog up all these tiny little spaces, and then be able to lay it down and print it. You know, we teach people how to do ohe kapala, and it's so hard to, you go with the negative and the positive space, and telling them what you don't put in is has just as much weight as what you do. The empty space is just as important as the black space. And that's kind of a hard concept to wrap your head around.
That's not something that people easily understand. I mean, you tell them negative and positive space, and they look at you like, But you take a very simple thing like diamonds. This is all positive space on the top. You explain that to them. You put it down in this direction repeatedly. And look at the negative space that you create in between. To me, that was really important with the Hawaiian mind, because it wasn't only what you saw, it's what you maybe didn't see.
Usually the printer, the ohe kapala, is inked by brushing the dye onto the ohe kapala and then tapping off the residue, the extra. I wipe off the back of that printer because I don't want it to smear. And then I take it over and print on my kapa. Now this looks like it'll take a long time. It takes a little while, but after you get the hang of it and after you've done it for a while, this happens very quickly.
Straight lines are made with the use of single and multiple line instruments, as well as through cord snapping.
Now this one would be a single line, but then we have liners where the bamboo was split. Two or three here, and 4. Okay, and then this one was carved out of hardwood with even more. The edge has been ground down just a little bit, so when you lay it on the surface of the kapa and drag it across, the ink flows down the tines and makes a line like so.
9 and what?
21. It's almost 9.
So-
almost 11. Oh, that's good.
Plus 2 more. You know, I'd say 2 feet. So 11.
Yeah, perfect. See, I might not need a 5th piece, because that's a lot of overlap.
All of the tools and methods adapted by island kapa makers through the ages gave rise to a variety in design, texture, and color, resulting in a refined artistic expression that is distinctly Hawaiian. At the Ho'ike Night of the Merry Monarch, the richness of this art would once again be seen in one of the most traditional uses, adorning the bodies of hula dancers.
I just like the organic. I mean, I like growing things, and a lot of times you're working with pretty rigid pieces like the ohe kapala, and how do I make something that's rigid, organic, and fluid, and even to capture some of the natural forms. So I tried looking at actually stenciling, because if I would have to repeat these curves, you know, by hand painting it. So I tried some stenciling, and that comes off of the Fijian method, and then come back again with just working it like a painting, because my traditions are in a painting tradition.
You know, like this color here Eric has, it's already really, really dark. It's, what is that dye that you're using, the dark one?
Combination of pala'a and hili from kukui. Your hili kukui bark is like shellac. It's actually a form of shellac, so it'll shine. You see this in the Samoan kapa. They use a lot of the hili dye from kukui. the inner bark.
I decided that this piece, the piece that I was going to be making, would be as close to red or the colors of the lava that happen to be going now and the flow of the lava. I'm doing this for Hawaii Island and for a halau that's from that island. So using the alaia and using the burnt sienna type of color, that's how we came up with the overall color of this particular pa'u that we're working on. Now, when it comes to the ohe kapala, I knew I had this design that I call mauna, and it's nothing more than a triangle that has a lot of little triangles in it, but it looks like, you know, you can create it to look like mountains. This one was definitely one that I know I wanted to use in my surface design. So you have positive space going in this direction, you have negative space going in that direction. I want to try and line it up on the middle, where the 2 points come together. The second thing that I also thought about is, you know, the flowing of the volcano, just the whole idea of flowing, period. I thought about leis and how leis wind around things, you know. So this one I call hiapo. When I think about the Hawaii Island and I think about how they're going to use this in that halau, they always have leis and things from that island. They have beautiful red lehua, and orange and yellow lehua up in the mountains. So, you know, naturally I'm thinking forest, I'm thinking something from there. And that's why I end up with kupu kupu. This is a design that's very small and intricate that has lots of good negative space besides the positive space. That one of the most important things about Hawaiian design is it should have both negative and positive. One of my favorite ohe kapala to use is the hala, the lei hala. Okay? It's very easy to make it move and cause it to move like a lei, and that's what I wanted. Okay? So I knew I was going to use the lei hala.
This is very contemporary, but inspired by our ancestors and what they did.
Yeah.
No, I wish they all had 18-inch waists like this. You know, it would be so easy.
Yeah, we'll make more pleats in the back. We'll go some more. Oh, love that song.
Thank you. I love the sound.
I like this too because this is the,
It's heavy.
it's contrasty.
Yes.
It's really heavy.
Okay, that's it then.
Yeah. Okay. And then this looks lovely. Okay, shall I tell my girls to skip a meal?
I have to make a pa'u for this project, a skirt. And so I decided that I was going to do it in sections. So this is my prototype in small fashion. So I'm going to take these strips that I've just applied color onto, and I'm going to lash them together, and they will be worn around the waist like so. Then over this will be a cummerbund-like belt. And it will be out of another piece. So I've used 2 colors so far. This blue is haha, or delicia. It's a native lobelia. It's on the endangered species list. The fruits are collected and then ground up, and then the color from the fruits is applied. It comes out from steel blue to a deep purple, depending on how intense the color is applied. And then this is haha on here. The base pink here is akala, a native raspberry. Another kapa maker gathered the fruits up in the mountains and gave them to me. And we've been saving them in the freezer. And when we take them out, we just let them thaw. And the juice from the akala was simply applied on with a brush or with a liner. You can see these lines are put on with a liner. They form the basis of the color of my pa'u. So I have much more work to do, and then the initial lashing, and then I'll wrap it up and send it to Kumu Nalani, and she'll hopefully be surprised and pleased. Does it feel secure? Like a paper clip kind of thing.
We want that pa'u to actually touch that floor.
Oh, I see.
This is going to be Hawaiian kapa, and it's going to look like Hawaiian, and it's going to be the colors and the designs and the things that we recognize as Hawaiian kapa.
While the kapa makers are busy at work, the dancers spend many hours in rehearsal, striving for perfection.
That's the top.
A few weeks before the ho'ike night, kapa arrives in boxes at the halau hula. Kumuhula and kapa makers look over all of the kapa, trying the different pieces on dancers in an informal fitting. By the night of the performance, each dancer will have been matched to a particular piece of kapa and carefully instructed on how to drape and tie it.
Walk it over there.
As the festival approaches, Hilo becomes a hive of activity, and the kapa makers gather to enjoy the scene. In preparation, the dancers must learn how to bind and layer the kapa to their bodies. This ritual of careful dressing and attention to detail allows the dancers to commit to the hula and move from their everyday lives into a sacred space.
That's beautiful.
The kapa makers have been asked to wear their own kapa as part of the evening's festivities. They arrive and join together as a group, eager to see the beautiful Hawaiian arts of hula and kapa once again united.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are once again humbled and honored that they are gracing us here at the 48th Annual Ho'ike. This stadium is named after their mama, Edith Kanakaole. Please welcome, Halau Okekuhi.
He ki mākua lo ka kuhi hewa I pe kua nui ai kanaka I laila
Thank you all very much for keeping the tradition of kapa alive. Mahalo.
The Ho'ike Night is a rewarding artistic and cultural experience for the kapa makers, the halau, and the community. With the joy of seeing their vision fulfilled, the kapa makers return to their work with renewed inspiration.
Kapa is what I want to do. So it's every day, in some way, there's some part of kapa that is in my life, okay? And the practices and those kinds of values that I talked about before, they're a part of me now. And for them to be a part of you, I think that's better than life-changing.
I think my inspiration for making kapa, the main one, is to be able to preserve a particular tradition of our culture that was lost, and to make sure that it's never lost again. This is why the teaching component is so important for me.
It's fulfilling, and it's make my life worth, I guess you can say worth living, especially at this old age when It's just not something to do. It's something that really brings me satisfaction and joy. You know, I love doing it.
The Ho'ike performance closes with a mele kuku for the female chief Nahi'ene'ena. Performed with kua and ie kuku, this mele also honors the perseverance of the kapa makers of Hawaii. This program is brought to you in part thanks to generous support from the Hawaii State Foundation on Culture and the Arts, through appropriations from the legislature of the state of Hawaii, and by the National Endowment for the Arts, and the Hawaii Council for the Humanities.